as I have for many years. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I think you and I, are going to learn a great deal tonight about foods and farming and health. And it's something that is really important for all of us, no matter our age, to do our best to be healthy. And my guest tonight is a newcomer to the Sound Off program. His name is Doug Flack. Some of you may already know him, but I just met him tonight, and I'm glad I did. Doug is the Flack Family Farm in Fairfield. He and his wife are diversified organic farmers, and they focus on soil health as the basis for plant, animal, human, and planetary health. And I just can't wait to learn more. I did my research, but I know you're going to benefit from this program too if you pay attention. So welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. I didn't even know anything about you, but it was Tim, the mayor,
yes.
Tim Smith, who spoke to a friend of mine who got in touch with me and said, Linda ought to have Doug Flack on the program. Actually, Tim was on not very recently, so, or very recently, I should say. So, how did you get into this this type of farming? You've been farming for a long time.
Yeah, about 40 years. I had worked as a scientist in New Zealand for 6 years.
No kidding.
And I came on a ship, more or less straight to Vermont from New Zealand in 1976. And my work, I lived amongst farmers that whole time.
Okay.
And they were often close friends of mine. And New Zealand was very advanced in the world in terms of their knowledge of grazing livestock. Mm-hmm. Because New Zealand could not grow any grain. And so they had an enormous dairy industry, huge. And as a result of ideas that came from France, from a brilliant Frenchman named André Voisin, the New Zealanders were very advanced in grazing management. And the dairy farmers were the leading people. The sheep farmers were behind. They learned and farmed behind them. Mm-hmm. And they had a very interesting way of sharing information and learning their craft. And that was from each other,
sure.
Not from experts. And so they had farmer discussion groups in New Zealand. And they carried the intensive management of grazing to a very high degree through these farmers teaching each other.
Nice.
Yeah. And
I like that.
Yeah. And so that had a big influence on me. And long before I went there, I had really wanted to farm. So we bought some land and slowly built our farm up in the north end of Fairfield.
Quite a process, huh?
Oh yeah, it's been a lot of work.
I believe it, but work is a good four-letter word, as I told the students.
I agree. I love it, and so we just carry on.
Well, farming has changed dramatically, and as you know, in the state of Vermont, we've lost a lot of farms.
Yeah, it's really tragic.
It is tragic, because what's more important than food?
You're absolutely right.
You know, if we're going to survive, we need our farms, we need our farmers,
right.
And we need the land to be conducive, the soils and so forth, to be conducive to the kind of production that's needed.
Yes.
And do the farmers meet? And I know there's a farmers, group, the co-op, I guess. But do the farmers ever meet and discuss what they're doing and, encourage one another or advise one another if they found something really helpful?
Yes, they do, but they tend to be scattered in different organizations. So, for example, I and my oldest daughter, who's a farm consultant, and a number of farmer friends founded an organization back in the 90s called the Vermont Grass Farmers Association.
Okay.
And that's going very well. That was one organization where farmers were helping each other. And then there's the Organic Farmers, NOFA Vermont. That's another organization that's very active in farmers interacting with each other, learning from each other, bringing in speakers and so on. And the dairy farmers have a number of organizations. There's organic dairy farmers and conventional dairy farmers, and then there's vegetable farmers, and there's the Vegetable Growers Association. So there's many of these kinds of
variety.
groups. Yeah, and they're very important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I confess that I know next to zero about, except that I have a little 4x8. I used to have a big garden when I lived in Enosburg years ago, and I do canning and all that. But now I just have a little 4x8 raised bed.
Yes.
For some veggies.
You can grow a lot in 4x8.
Yes, you can. I found that out.
Right.
And herbs, I do herbs, and then I bottle them, and got my little tomatoes and lettuce and all that.
Sure.
But
everybody should be doing that.
Well, it's fun.
It should be every yard should be growing food. These lawns with their chemicals on them to suppress weeds are a big mistake.
I don't do that.
And people should be growing their own food, and it's something that's coming. In World War II.
Self-sufficiency.
Yeah, in World War II, overnight there were victory gardens.
Sure, I remember
that. Virtually everybody pitched in.
Sure.
And I think we should go there.
I think that's a great idea. And I remember now that they were talking about this, that in our yard at home when I was growing up, we had a very big garden.
Yeah.
And I remember going out and picking the vegetables and bringing, my mom would can.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience. It's healthy.
Yeah.
And it gives you self-sufficiency.
That's right. Yeah.
So we'll have to encourage people, even if you just have, like I have, a little 4x8 raised bed. It's such a treat to go out there and look at those little cherry tomatoes on those plants and know that I did that.
Yeah. Well, the great writer E.B. White, Charlotte's Web, and One Man's Meat. And, he's one of the great American writers. In World War II, he was producing thousands of eggs for the war effort on his little farm in Maine.
No kidding.
Amongst other things. So, all kinds of people can look forward, I think, to.
You think it's coming, huh?
I think it needs to come.
I think that's a good idea.
Now, we need a lot more than vegetables, and that's one of the big points of my chart here. You
want the chart up?
Sure, when you can.
Sure.
Because
magic.
One of my big focuses for the last 20 years is trying to gather together the information to understand why we're in such a difficult place with human health in this country, and it's spreading all over the world. Mm-hmm. And the nature of our health crisis. All you hear on the news is health care costs and so on. Well, the real nature of the crisis is degenerative disease, and it's generated largely by industrial cheap food.
Industrial cheap food?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, processed foods.
Okay.
And I would like to address some of the more critical elements of that, because it's a big story and we may not have enough time tonight to cover it all.
Okay.
And I'd like to point out that people have been aware of this for a very long time, but our general culture has not taken the information in and paid attention and applied it.
That's a big problem in a lot of areas. Yes.
So, as a good example, one of the great soil scientists of the 20th century was a guy named William Albrecht.
Okay.
He was a professor of soil science, I think, at Missouri. And right after World War II, he did a phenomenal study. He pulled out the records of 70,000 sailors from World War II.
Wow.
And he looked at their dental records, and he mapped their dental health against a soil map of the United States. And if the sailor were, and back then people lived where they were raised. They didn't move all over the country, the way, So it was meaningful to look at where they were raised. And if they were raised on really fertile soils with very high mineral content, they had very healthy teeth and generally very healthy lives. And he connected with another great researcher, a similar aged man, born in the 19th century, doing his work in the 20th century, Weston A. Price. And Weston A. Price was both a scientist, an anthropologist, and a dentist.
Oh.
He was an amazing man. And in his dental work, he couldn't understand why people were so unhealthy. And this is in the 1920s.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
And so he and his wife closed a dental practice and traveled for 10 years all over the planet, everywhere. And they picked out 14 cultures in very diverse environments to study carefully. People living at 10,000 feet in the Andes, people in tropical islands of the Pacific, people on isolated islands in the British Isles, in the Hebrides, a group of people that lived in an isolated valley in Switzerland, African tribes, people from Papua New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand, so representing almost every cultural type in the world. And what he discovered surprised him, that these people had not been reached by Western food, by what we call processed foods. So they provided their own food through various means, depending on Inuit also. So some of them through hunting, many of them through various forms of farming. But 14 cultures eating 14 completely different diets.
Interesting.
But they were super healthy, these people. And they had very healthy children. And what he found in common with all of them was the diet was very high, the foods were very high in mineral, 5 to 10 times higher than the minerals in the 1930s in the US diet, 5 to 10 times. And the diets were very high in animal fats. And there were other aspects to their diet too. There were lots of live foods. They tended, if they were eating animals, they were eating whole animals. They weren't just eating steaks, and so on. And so even though one culture was at 10,000 feet in the Andes and they were eating potatoes and guinea pigs, and another culture was in the Arctic eating seals and fish and so on, and some of them were on tropical islands eating pork and coconut and taro and fish, they all had in common this phenomenal health, healthy children, perfect teeth, almost never cavities, no impacted teeth, no crooked teeth, none of them.
Amazing.
And it was because of the commonality of the high mineral diet and the fat-soluble vitamins that come from the animal foods that they ate whole. I mean, if they killed an animal, they ate the liver and the tongue and the heart and so on. They didn't waste anything.
So what is it that enhances or creates the minerals in the soil?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah. let's approach it from this point of view. Modern farming techniques tend to deplete the minerals.
Wow.
And that's our problem in North America, because we have many locations where we had phenomenal soils. But, and it's a big topic, so we won't be able to go into all the details, but our farming techniques tend to deplete the minerals, and we tend to focus in a very narrow way on what we think makes a plant grow. Without
Fertilizer.
Yeah, very narrowly focused fertilizers. And what really goes on in the soil, in a healthy soil, what really runs the system is a combination of bacteria and fungi and structural features of the soil itself. So soil structure, which is largely created by the microbes, the bacteria, and especially the fungi. And so if your farming techniques damage, so then the bacteria and the fungi actually interact with the minerals in the soil and provide the minerals to the plants. And so if you have the basic minerals in the soil already, all you need is a system to deliver them to the plants. And that's the fungi and the bacteria interacting with each other.
So the fungi that's not, I mean, excuse my ignorance, but that's not mushrooms and things like that.
Well, a mushroom is a representation of some of the fungi in the soil. It's just the reproductive body. So it just pops up every once in a while when things are right, the right time of year, the right temperature, the right moisture. But what that little mushroom represents is a reproductive body of a huge organism underground. And some of them are hundreds of acres in size.
Bacteria and fungi.
Well, the fungi, just the fungi itself.
And the bacteria?
There are just thousands of kinds of bacteria, millions.
But they're good bacteria.
Yes. That's a separate question, but of course, yeah. A bacteria becomes what we would call a pathogen when it's out of balance with other microbes. So microbes interact with each other to create complex systems that balance each other. And but when we do something that disrupts that balance, one or two or a few kinds of bacteria can get out of control. And when they reach a certain population size, they become pathogenic.
Like herbicides?
Herbicides are chemicals.
I mean, that would ruin the bacteria and the
herbicides, and they can disrupt things, and so do all kinds of, like, bad diet. A bad diet disrupts the microbes in us, on and in us. And for example, a high sugar diet creates an environment that's perfect for the wrong kinds of microbes in and on us.
Wow.
Yeah, and so a lot of diseases arise from disrupting the microbes that live in and on us. And the same thing can happen in the soil if we disrupt the normal populations and diversity, large numbers of species, and the balance between them in the soil. Then we get more weeds, we get more disease in the plants. It's amazing, the ramifications.
You know, for my little garden that I mentioned, I buy manure. And each year I spread manure and I till it in and so forth. This year, or this last year, I had weeds come up in that for the first time. They were this high.
Sure.
I was pulling them out. And I said, what the heck is this?
Yes.
So.
Well, you imported the seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it came out of the manure.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's not a good thing.
Well, it created a lot of work for you, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and if you were a vegetable farmer, it would make it very difficult.
Yes.
For example, the way we grow the cabbage, we produce last year we produced 21 tons of kimchi and sauerkraut, 2 kinds of kimchi on our farm. And the way we grow the cabbage is to create raised beds so that there's good drainage, and then we put compost on it, and then we shred second cut round bales and put it down that thick.
Of what?
Second cut hay.
Oh, okay.
From round bale form, the big wrapped. Mm-hmm. We shred those, and we spread that deep over the whole field. And then we lay out a grid, and we crawl on our hands and knees and make little holes. This is very time-consuming, and stick the little new cabbages in each little hole on 18-inch centers. And there's no weeding. And the thick mulch of the hay creates a perfect environment in the soil for the bacteria and the fungi. And the bacteria and the fungi interact with the compost and the soil minerals and feed the cabbage. And the thick mulch suppresses the weeds, so there's no weeding.
Wow.
And we grow, the cabbages average 14 pounds.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so in less than a half an acre, we get 30 tons of cabbage. And
you make sauerkraut?
Three different forms of fermented vegetables.
Do you grow red cabbage too, or just?
Yes, red cabbage, and we also grow onions and garlic and carrots and daikon radish, and all of these are part of our ferments.
Now, and this is all organic farming.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The definition of organic farming, please.
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask on that because I'm not big on definitions.
Okay.
But the point of organic farming is to work with nature
instead of against it. Huh?
And instead of against it, and to use essentially what I was talking about to build really high functioning soil. Whether you're a livestock farmer or a vegetable farmer or a fruit farmer, you want really high-functioning soil. That means good soil structure, high mineral content, and this great balance of microbes and fungi. And that will lead to healthy plants, and healthy plants fed to animals or fed, grazed by animals, create healthy animals. And we have, by the way, a herd of cattle. We have a flock of sheep. We raise pigs. We do all of this.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah. And so organic farming is essentially learning to farm with nature. And we try to strive towards more and more local utilization of resources. So, for example, it's very important to have livestock on our farm to grow the vegetables because the manures from the winter are composted for growing the vegetables in the summer.
I see.
However, we go beyond that because we use hardwood chips from the forest to mix with the manure because that helps to favor the fungi and balance the compost. And we also rake in the fall, in the spring actually, we rake leaves. In spring and fall, we rake leaves, huge bag full of them, and put leaves in every bucket load of compost. And that brings in elements from the forest, including all kinds of forest microbes and minerals from the trees.
Wow.
So we're trying to create a system where we're using more and more of the local resources to help create healthy soil function.
Fascinating.
Now, another really important thing about the way we farm is that we use intensely managed grazing techniques. So our cattle are moved sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and they're given fresh pasture 3 or 4 times a day, and they have a fence behind them so they can't go back on the old pasture, let it
Wow.
recover. And we do the same with the sheep. And what that's done during 40 years is raise the carbon, the organic matter, in our soil from just a few percent to between 9 and 11%.
Carbon is good in your soil?
Yeah, that's part of, an essential part of creating a home for the fungi and the bacteria and the creation of soil structure. And what that does is it takes excess carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and stores it in the soil. And that's a tool that could be used all over the world to help lower the amount of carbon dioxide that we're blowing into the atmosphere. Yeah. So that's a very important part of the functioning of our farm also, is sequestering carbon using livestock as a tool in grazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not simple.
It's not simple, and I'll tell you what, I'm learning every day. I learn more and more and more. And you learn through practice and observation and spending time at it and making mistakes. And,
oh, sure.
And hitting the concrete wall sometimes, going splatter.
Sometimes those are the best lessons.
They are. And you learn from other people and from the organizations that you might attend a meeting and so on. So,
yeah, well, speaking about that, Doug, you have events at your farm.
Yes.
And people can come, not only can they purchase healthy foods.
Yes.
Do you sell the meat too?
Yes, we do sell meat, and the fermented vegetables we'll sell on the farm, but we're in about 30 stores and restaurants in in central and northern Vermont. Yep.
I'm going to have to find out where.
Rail City Market right here, and the St. Albans Co-op Creamery, and Bob's Meat Market, right in St. Albans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
You hear that, folks? That's great.
Yeah.
So, when you give presentations, which you do,
Yeah.
they focus on the principles of a healthy diet
Yes.
as defined by Weston Price
That's correct. Yeah.
and the relationship with biodynamic foods.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to have some water.
Well, I think the biodynamics was the creation. That particular word came out of the work of a German named Rudolf Steiner. And he gave a lecture in 1924 to about 100 farmers. They begged him to give the lecture in 1924. He was working in music, he was working in dance, education, many fields. But they wanted him to address farming. And why? Because in 1924, those farmers were seeing that their livestock were not as healthy as they used to be, their crops were not as good or as healthy, and they were scratching their heads. They didn't know what was going on. They suspected this and that, and Steiner gave this amazing one-week-long lecture series about it, and that's where biodynamics came out of. Now, we use some we think biodynamic principles are useful, but we feel like we're digging way beyond biodynamics because the principles of 1924 don't necessarily fit what I'm doing and thinking. So what I explained early in the lecture, about the microbes and the fungi, and using wood chips and using leaves from the forest and manures from the farm, all of those are added to our repertoire as farmers.
It's not
many other things too.
It's not simple. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
How many organic farms are there in Vermont that you know of?
Well, there are roughly 200 organic dairy farms, and then there are many hundreds of other dairy farms, vegetable farms, fruit farms, diverse farms like ours. Yes.
Do you ever bring any of your vegetables to the farmers market?
No, we grow our vegetables strictly to ferment them, and then, for example, last fall in September and October, we made 123 55-gallon barrels of ferments. That's 21 tons.
Tell us what that's all. What fermenting?
Yeah. Okay. So, good question.
I'm a novice here.
Yeah, that's good. Your questions are great. Fermenting is one of the oldest food processing techniques that humans have known how to do. At least 10,000 years, probably much longer. And, you know, in our culture, we mostly think about vinegar, beer, wine as ferment. And we might vaguely remember sauerkraut.
Oh, I make that. I love it.
Good for you. Well, and what it is a technique to direct microbes, not just bacteria, but it can be fungi or bacteria or yeast, or to direct, and cheeses also, their fermentation products, to direct, so the humans become the directors or of the microbe world for a particular substrate. So if it's milk, you know, you're controlling temperature and other things. You might be introducing certain microbes. If it's wine, there's a whole nother approach, and beer. Well, with vegetables, if the vegetable is really grown well, it contains everything in the microbe world that you need. So on our farm, all we have to do is cut the vegetables up and know the weight of them, and then mix them with a measured amount of salt based on the weight of the vegetables. And then pack it tightly and weight it down so the air can't get in, but the fermentation gases can get out. And what happens is the microbes begin to proliferate, to multiply, because they eat the plant sugars. And in the case of vegetable fermentation, they turn the plant sugars into lactic acid. And lactic acid slowly drops the pH, the acidity, from around 7 down to about 3.1.
Wow.
And that'll happen in about 6 weeks. And that becomes the preservative of the food without killing the microbes. As the pH drops, the different microbes shift their population sizes, because some like pH
Acidy
here.
and some like basic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then we have this in 55-gallon barrels.
Wow.
And when we want to sell it to the public, we open a barrel up and put it in quart jars or half-gallon jars or pint jars or buckets, 5-gallon buckets. We sell all those different sizes. And, but we don't cook it. See, that's the trouble with modern processed food. You know, for the sauerkraut you buy in the store is usually cooked, so it's got very little food value. If we have time, I'd love to go through some of those on this chart.
Well, why don't you do that now?
Yes.
Just tell us what it's about.
All right. So just to finish up on the fermentation, so this fermented vegetable product turns out to be really great for people's mouths, throat, and stomach, and the whole intestinal system, because you're pouring millions of microbes down your throat that you need to replenish all the time.
Wow.
And so it's one of the things that's very important to be eating. It's live foods. You know, you get it from good cheeses, unpasteurized beer. You heard that.
I'm not a beer drinker.
Me neither. I can't.
I wish I would, I guess. But
yeah, I'm not either. So in this chart, what this chart, it's complex, and I do spend hours with classes in this chart. But what we're looking at here is the progression of the change in our food over 200 years in Vermont.
This is 1800, right?
Yeah, 1800 to 2019.
Okay.
And but we can also project this over about 10,000 years of human history because it shows the same thing. And let's follow.
This is interesting.
Right.
The minerals in soil and food.
Very good. Run your finger down there.
1800 to
yeah.
1850, and then down to
very low
1950, and even lower in the 2000s. Wow.
And Weston A. Price measured that in those 14 different places on the planet, and found that the mineral content of foods was sky high in all those places. And he compared it to our food in the 1920s, right, in this period here.
Yeah. So the people in those places where he went to visit, as you mentioned earlier, around the world, had all these minerals in their soil and in their food.
Yes.
And that's what made them so healthy.
That's one of the things.
Okay.
And a key thing.
Okay.
Right. So the second thing that you'll see in here, I gotta see if I can read this chart.
Well, this is the grain, annual grains.
Yeah, that's separate. Okay.
Start of chemical farming.
Yep. By the way, that was what caused the loss of health in 1924 that Rudolf Steiner. The start of chemical farming really caused a decline in food.
And what exactly? Give me an example of some of the farming, the chemicals.
Well, back then it was nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus largely, NPK.
In the soils.
Yeah, that they started bringing in and dumping in the soil instead of developing techniques to keep the soil generating its own fertility.
Okay.
So I can see on this chart, for some reason, we're missing some important things. But for example, this black line here shows the loss of eating organ meats from animals. So back when my father was born in 1904.
Mine was born in 1906.
Yeah, there we go. My mom, 1906. Back then, when they went to the butcher, they came home with liver. They came home with hearts, tongue.
My mother used to serve that tongue, cow's tongue.
Exactly. And we don't do that anymore. And we've lost the tremendous nutritional value of those things. Those are essential in the diet.
Wow.
And furthermore, they cooked everything either in beef tallow or lard or butter.
And
with great health benefits.
Oh, that was good.
That was good.
Oh, okay.
And we've demonized that. Here's something. I'll hold this up for the camera. I don't know if the camera can see it.
Yeah. He's zooming in.
Yeah.
Turn it a little.
Okay, there we go.
That way. No, wait a minute. That way.
Okay. So we'll hold that right there. Let them eat junk. Now, this was written 39 years ago in the Saturday Review, and it's a very accurate description of what we've done and lost in our food. And here is the next illustration. It's a cow with the skin peeled away, and there's nothing but factories in it.
Oh, my.
And nothing but mixing all kinds of crazy things into the food. And resulting in essentially a toxic environment for our food. So let them eat junk. And the consequence of this, losing important qualities like eating whole animals and not, for example, blood puddings and blood sausage, not just the organs, all the parts.
What about chicken liver?
It's great food.
Okay.
Fabulous.
I used to like that.
Pâtés.
Oh,
yeah.
I like pâté.
And sausages were always a way of using all these parts if they didn't get cooked directly. And so sausages were really good, and they were often mixed with pork fat, and here's an interesting thing about pork fat. If the pig's raised outdoors in the sunshine, his or her skin, make vitamin D in huge quantities on the skin. And then it's absorbed through the skin.
Into the organs? Or?
Into the fat.
Into the fat.
And so lard is a great source of vitamin D, vitamin D3. But everybody got scared of it. These people were promoting the idea that these animal fats cause heart disease, and nothing could be farther from the truth.
You know, I saw on your website that eat fat, lose fat.
Yes.
And members of my family are on a keto diet.
Yeah, very good.
Where you eat more fat, correct?
You're right on it.
And you lose weight.
Yes.
I have
and
to try.
furthermore, you can prevent cancer and all kinds of diseases with a ketotic diet.
Really?
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to look into that. I could stand to drop a few pounds.
Just guess what cancer cells love to feed on?
Tell me.
Sugar.
Oh, boy.
Now, let's look back at this chart. Cane sugar. What color is that? Purple?
Oops, purple.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back in the 19th century, the per capita consumption in Vermont of cane sugar was about 4 pounds. That's a year. Today, it's 130 pounds.
Whoa.
And there's an interesting story we don't have time for as to how that happened. But, and then add on to that, somebody developing a way of turning corn into corn syrup, which is fructose, another
Which is
sugar.
not good, right?
Seriously not good. And so now we have even more fructose in the diet than sucrose.
You see it. You know, I read labels when I buy things.
Yeah.
Corn syrup.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, so I put it back.
It's everywhere.
Excuse me.
It's everywhere. So you combine a high corn syrup and high sugar diet and this other thing, industrial oils. Now that doesn't mean diesel fuel or gasoline. What that means is vegetable oils like from safflower and corn oil and all the seed oils.
Olive oil?
No, olive oil is a fruit oil, and it's really good for you.
Okay.
And so is coconut fat.
Okay, good. I have the
Those are really
big
good
thing
for
of
you,
that.
but not when you squeeze a seed. In general, if you did that locally with a very thoughtful methodology, it'd be okay to use small amounts of it. But it's done in gigantic factories under high pressure and heat. And those seed oils are very unstable.
So that would be, what's a seed oil?
Well, corn oil is a good example. It's one of the worst.
So don't have corn oil?
Yeah, don't have corn oil or any of the oils that are on the aisles of the supermarkets, and not counting olive and coconut. All of them, safflower, sunflower oil, you name it.
Not good.
Not good because they're unstable molecules. And in the process of making them, very toxic elements develop.
Oh, boy.
And once you take in some of those oils, there's a half-life in your body. Mm-hmm. So a 2-month half-life minimal. So you eat some French fries from some fast food joint that's cooked in these vegetable oils, you're poisoning yourself. And it takes 2 months to get rid of half of the poison.
Oh, boy.
And then another 2 months to get rid of that half of the, so it goes on and on and on. And so that's part of the junk food, is cooking things in the wrong kinds of fat. Mm-hmm. We should be cooking our foods in lard and in beef tallow. And that's the way we did it until the early 90s.
What's beef tallow?
That's the fat of cows.
Oh, okay.
And it should be grass-fed cows, not
I
grain-fed.
use butter.
Butter.
And coconut oil. And olive oil. Olive oil.
Yeah. Those are really healthy oils.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Doing something right.
Yeah. Well, you look like. I mean, you and I aren't spring chickens.
No, we're not. We're still quacking, but
right. So
I feel very grateful.
So here we've dropped the minerals out of our diet. We've dropped the whole foods out of our diet. And we've added sugar and industrial oils that are toxic and corn syrup. And look where we are. We have crooked teeth, wisdom tooth impactions, tooth decay, osteoporosis, and all these other what we call degenerative diseases.
Cancer, heart disease, hypertension, digestive disorders, appendicitis, diabetes and obesity, adrenal insufficiency, that's the adrenal gland, neurological Parkinson's disease, MS, and Alzheimer's, and what is that? ADHD. Oh.
Yeah, ADHD, autism, that whole spectrum. Allergies, autoimmune disease, arthritis, infertility, depression, mental illness, birthing and breastfeeding problems, carpal tunnel and repetitive motion diseases.
Disorders, yeah.
And it was very clear from not just Weston A. Price's work, but his work was solid, that these did not occur in these cultures. And many of the people were elderly. They did not get these diseases, and he measured it.
Wow. Well, I know this. I have to clean my cupboard out of chocolate.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't get overly worried about chocolate. A little bit here and there, yeah.
All right. Pace myself.
Yeah, pace yourself, yeah.
Okay, I'll try.
There's a lot of other things. Now, I had a man come and work on my farm about 10 years ago. And he came from the corporate world. He was 45, I think, when he came. And he was 6'4", big man.
Big boy, yep.
He was a big guy, and I'm a shrimp. And so it was pretty funny to see us walking down the road. But he wrote a book about his experience in the junk food world and how it nearly killed him. And at a certain point, he was over 450 pounds in weight.
Whoa.
And he discovered this work of Weston A. Price, this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And he discovered this foundation, the Weston A. Price Foundation. And he read all of this stuff and realized that he had really discovered some important things. Went home, gave the information to his wife, who was studied it carefully. Mm-hmm. They had a little meeting. They opened up the front door, went to their cupboards and their refrigerator, took everything out of their house because they were eating junk food, which is the regular food. We all think it's food. It's not food. Mm-hmm. And he lost 300 pounds and saved his life.
Wow.
And so then he came and spent 6 weeks with us learning to farm. And he had been an upper level person in the corporate world, and he was an artist. And he now is a small farmer.
Oh, great.
And he drives the food truck for a very large organic farm.
No kidding.
Yes. And he's super healthy.
What a switch.
What a switch. And
all of his life really changed.
His whole life changed, and he saved his life.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, so it's a great story, and it's the story of this chart. Yeah, this is an amazing book.
Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
A shocking and powerful testament to the adverse effects of modern processed diets upon health. Sounds good.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a little late in the game, but
well, so was
trying
I.
to do something. What about kale? I eat kale.
Yeah, it's a good food. Yeah.
Spinach.
Yeah, as long as you eat it with
you have to know.
plenty of butter with it.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
cook it in butter.
Oh yeah, yeah, and olive oil, or cook it in lard, or whatever you like.
Okay.
Yeah, but when you eat these plant foods, it's important to eat fats with them.
Okay.
Yes, because otherwise the components of the plant have a harder time in
Digesting or?
well, doing something good for you.
Okay.
Because what Weston A. Price realized was the fats and the minerals together are critical in the metabolic processes in your cells. And if you don't have the fats and the minerals together, you start having health issues.
Okay. I have, in the last several years, lost my desire for meat.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. Frankly, some of the beef, I find it tough to chew,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm taking pieces out and putting it on my plate.
Yeah.
And I do like fish
Yeah. Yep.
and chicken, but I'm not getting fat. Well, salmon is a fatty.
Well, you're getting your fat from the butter, thank heaven, and the coconut fat and the olive oil.
Okay.
But the butter's key, because if you're not eating, you know, if you're not getting good grass-fed meats, that may be part of the problem. You're experiencing poor quality
But
meat.
where do you get the fats that you need in your diet? You get it from butter, and so. But what about meat?
Well, before we leave butter behind,
Okay.
cream and whole milk, and milk that's not pasteurized, raw milk. And we've been selling that on our farm for 18 years. And when my cows are dry, I buy raw milk from my various organic dairy farmer neighbors. But cream, like there's a farm over in Westfield, Vermont, on the other side of the mountains, named Butterworks Farm.
Yeah.
And they sell heavy cream, and you can buy it at Rail City Market, I think, and maybe some of the other stores. You can get it at Wood Meadow Market in Enosburg Falls. By the way, they sell our products too. But Wood Meadow Market sells a lot of Butterworks cream, and it's very heavy. And I want to tell you, I drink it straight. But I use it in my breakfast, which is, I take oats, whole oats, not chopped or anything, whole oats, and I soak them for 2 or 3 days and rinse the water, and then I cook them, and then I mix, then I take a bowl, and I put some butter in the bottom of the bowl, and I put the hot oats on top of that, mix it all together, and then I dump heavy cream on top of that. And I have that with eggs and with fermented vegetables. So that's how I start my day. Fermented vegetables, 2 or 3 eggs, a bowl of whole oats.
Steel cut oats, are you talking about?
Not steel cut.
That's what I have.
Yeah, get them whole. I can show you how to do it, but let's go back into this chart. And the reason steel cut oats aren't as good as whole oats is as soon as you chop a seed, it begins to oxidize.
Yep.
But if it has its covering, it's protected.
Shell, like
yeah.
that.
So in the 1880s, the Kellogg brothers
Yep.
invented machinery to take things like oats and wheat and all the different grains, barley, and break them up into their parts. And they would get oil and bran and germ and white flour.
Wheat germ, yeah.
And they'd sell all those. And they invented cornflakes, and they invented all these prepared cereals, and they hired PR people to say that these are the health food of the future. Mm-hmm. And they're junk food. And so our supermarket aisles are lined with
Junk food.
Junk food. And
Oatmeal, what about oats? Like oatmeal.
oats. Oh, yeah. Well, the trouble with prepared oatmeal is it's oxidized.
When you say prepared, like I have a jar.
Yeah, and it's got rolled oats in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, do it from the whole oat.
Where do you get those?
Well,
Health food store?
yeah, but Wood Meadow Market in Enosburg sells a lot of it, and probably Rail City Market has it. Yeah, and but you have to soak them for a long time. So
And then do you have to eat them immediately or cook them immediately?
No. Sometimes I'm busy and they soak for 4 or 5 days, and I just rinse them and then I cook them. And then I'll have a pot full of these things cooked, and I'll eat out of that for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
That makes it easy.
Yes.
So if you want to know the secrets of all of this, you get a hold of this book. I'll just hold it up and then I'll give it to you. It's called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. And she's one of the bravest ladies in this country. She went against the whole of the food establishment.
Oh, boy.
And she could be the CEO of Apple. That's how brilliant she is. Mm-hmm. But she chose to take care of her fellow man. And she wrote this book, Nourishing Traditions, and I'll let you read that title to the audience.
Okay. Right here, Nourishing Traditions, the cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and the diet dictocrats. The dictators,
yes.
The diet dictators.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that'll educate you to everything I've been talking about.
Oh, wow. Chicken liver pate.
Yes. I eat that every day. Not just chicken liver, pork liver, beef liver, lamb liver.
I guess I'm going to have to change my hors d'oeuvres and dips. Salmon, anchovy. Wow. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to ask you. There's something else you make,
Kimchi.
What is that?
Well, kimchi, kimchi is a Korean word. And it describes their way of fermenting certain vegetables. And in Korea, it's a kind of a cabbage, Savoy-like cabbage, kind of a floppy-leafed cabbage, along with daikon radish and carrots and all kinds of vegetables. And then they mix in seafood sauces and all sorts of things. Our kimchi is really Vermont Yankee kimchi.
Okay.
And basically what it is it's a fermented salad of cabbage, carrots, onions, daikon radish, garlic, ginger, and so on. Mm-hmm. And that's what our kimchi is. And we have another kind that's half radish and half red cabbage and ginger. And then plain sauerkraut is nothing but fermented cabbage.
Yes, my mother used to cook it with pork.
Yes, it's delicious with pork.
And she used to make sauerbraten. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, she was a great cook. Unfortunately, we're down to about a minute and a half.
All right. Well,
time flies when you're learning.
Well, it's been fun.
Yes, and thank you so much. What an education.
Well, I'm still educating myself, and I'll keep going until I'm not here.
Attaboy. Me too. I don't give up. I just keep going.
Never give up.
Right.
That's it.
I like the philosophy.
Yeah.
And so I just thank you so much for putting in, the time to come here and for all that you do to try to. I know you go and speak in different places. Give lectures or what have you.
That's true.
And I hope you get into some of the schools because the young people need to know.
They really do.
They're the future.
Yes.
Whether it's politics or whatever it is, food.
They are the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
So anything you want to say in the last few?
Well, it's been a real pleasure to be here. And I thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to speak to a larger public.
Yes,
so
and
great.
Thanks to Tim Smith.
Oh, and one other thing. In the fall, we invite the public to come and help us make the kimchi and sauerkraut.
Okay.
So look at our website in July and give us a phone call, and we'll give you a day to come and help us.
Oh, no kidding.
And when you help us, we'll feed you lunch and send you home with a jar to ferment yourself.
Oh, wow.
And give away all our secrets.
Okay, I've just made a note. Okay, folks, we're all finished for tonight. This has been fascinating. I've learned so much. I don't know why I'm losing my voice. Maybe that I let him talk more. But hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.